Shalom, precious sisters. I want to share something that has been stirring in my heart after coming through a 24-hour consecration fast. There are moments when the Father calls us to pause, to quiet the flesh, to step away from the normal appetites and rhythms of life, so that we can hear more clearly what the Spirit is saying. Fasting does not only empty the body, fasting reveals. It reveals what has been hidden beneath the noise. It reveals what has been rising quietly in the heart. It reveals what we have been tolerating. It reveals what we have been feeding. It reveals what has been shaping the atmosphere around us. When the appetite is quieted, other things begin to speak. Sometimes peace begins to speak. Sometimes grief begins to speak. Sometimes weariness begins to speak. Sometimes conviction begins to speak. Sometimes the Father brings our attention back to things we have overlooked because life has been busy, full, and demanding. And one of the things that has been pressing on my heart is this: a wise woman must watch what is rising in her house. Proverbs 31:27 says, "She watches over the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness." That verse is not merely about a woman being busy. It is not merely about chores, cooking, cleaning, laundry, or keeping the home running. It is deeper than that. To watch over the ways of her household means she is attentive to the path of the house. She is discerning the direction of the house. She is paying attention to what is forming, what is growing, what is being tolerated, what is being repeated, and what is beginning to shape the spirit of the home. A wise woman does not merely live in her house. She watches over it. She watches with prayer. She watches with wisdom. She watches with sobriety. She watches with love. And after a fast, that kind of watchfulness becomes even more important because fasting sharpens us. It brings us back to the gate. It reminds us that holiness is not only something we talk about in sacred seasons. Holiness must be guarded in the daily places, in the kitchen, in the conversation, in the attitude, in the correction, in the habits, the influences, in the atmosphere. And this brings me to the picture of leaven. In bread making, leaven works quietly. You take a small amount of leaven, and once it is worked into the dough, it begins to move through the whole lump. At first, it may not look like much is happening. The dough may look still. It may look ordinary. It may look unchanged. But something is working beneath the surface. Given warmth and time, the dough begins to rise. And in a warm climate, leaven works quickly. That is the picture. Not everything that rises in a house begins loudly. Sometimes things begin very quietly. A tone, a look, a repeated attitude, a small dishonor, a little bitterness, a hidden resentment, a worldly influence, a spirit of vanity, a refusal to be corrected, a careless word, a habit that no one wants to confront. At first, it may seem small, and because it seems small, we may ignore it. We may say, "It is not that serious." We may say, "I don't want to make an issue out of everything." We may say, "I'm just trying to keep the peace." But sisters, peace and passivity are not the same thing. Sometimes what we call peace is really avoidance. Sometimes what we call patience is really neglect. Sometimes what we call love is really fear of confrontation. A wise woman must learn the difference, because leaven doesn't need a large opening. It only needs to be worked in. And once it's given warmth, time, and tolerance, it begins to spread. This is true in bread, and it's also true in a household. The home has a warmth to it. Hearts are close. Lives are intertwined. The words of one person affect another. The attitude of one person can shift the atmosphere. The disorder of one person can begin to create disorder for others. That is why a woman who fears Adonai must pay attention to what is rising, not with suspicion, not with fear, not with harshness, not with control, but with discernment. There is a watchfulness that comes from anxiety, and there is a watchfulness that comes from wisdom. An anxious woman watches to control. A wise woman watches to guard. An anxious woman reacts to everything. A wise woman discerns what matters. An anxious woman becomes harsh. A wise woman becomes prayerful. An anxious woman is driven by fear. A wise woman is led by the fear of Adonai. That is the difference. The woman of Proverbs 31 is not idle. She is not spiritually asleep. She's not careless with what has been entrusted to her. She watches over the ways of her household. She sees, she discerns, she responds. And sometimes watching begins with a simple question. What is rising here? Is peace rising? Is honor rising? Is humility rising? Is gratitude rising? Is holiness rising? Is order rising? Is tenderness rising? Is the fear of Adonai rising? Or is something else beginning to work its way through the lump? Is offense rising? Is bitterness rising? Is rebellion rising? Is disrespect rising? Is vanity rising? Is division rising? Is spiritual laziness rising? Is compromise rising? These are not questions we ask to condemn our households. These are questions we ask because we love our households. A woman cannot guard what she refuses to discern, and she cannot correct what she refuses to see. This is one of the lessons of a fast. A fast may only last 24 hours, but the lessons of consecration must continue after the fast is over. It is possible to abstain from food for a day and still return to the same disorder. It is possible to quiet the body and then go right back to feeding old patterns. It is possible to consecrate for a moment, but not carry consecration into the household. But the Father does not call us to fast merely so we can say we fasted. He calls us to return. He calls us to listen. He calls us to repent. He calls us to become watchful again. He calls us to bring the light of consecration into the ordinary places, into the kitchen, the bedroom, the living room, into the conversations, into the way we speak, into the way we correct, into the way we forgive, into the way we set boundaries, the way we guard the atmosphere of our homes. Because a home is not a small thing. The home is a place of formation. The home is where hearts are shaped. It's where patterns are learned. It's where honor is either cultivated or neglected. The home is where holiness is either practiced or spoken of only in theory. This is why the enemy loves to work quietly in homes. He doesn't always need something dramatic. Sometimes he works through irritation or exhaustion, sometimes through offense, sometimes through distraction, through unchecked attitudes, through the slow acceptance of things that once grieved us. And before we know it, the atmosphere has shifted. This is why the wise woman watches early. She watches before the dough has fully risen with the wrong leaven. She watches when the sign is still small, when the attitude is still forming, when the influence is just beginning to enter. She watches when the conversation starts to turn, when the spirit of the house begins to feel different. Not every small thing requires a loud response, but every small thing requires discernment. Some things must be covered in prayer. Some things must be addressed gently. Some things must be corrected firmly. Some things must be removed. Some things must be brought into the light. Some things must be refused at the door. This is not cruelty. This is stewardship. It's not unloving to guard the atmosphere of the home. It's not harsh to set a holy boundary. It's not controlling to say, this spirit will not rule here. It's not fear-based to protect what Adonai has entrusted to you. A holy home must have mercy, but it must also have order. A holy home must have patience, but it must also have standards. A holy home must have tenderness, but it must also have truth. A holy home must have love, but love does not allow corruption to become culture. And this is where many women grow weary, because watching over a household is not always seen. It's not always praised. It's not always understood. Sometimes the woman who watches is accused of being too serious, too sensitive, too intense, too particular, too spiritual, too concerned. But sisters, the woman who fears Adonai is not called to be asleep so others can remain comfortable. She's called to be faithful, faithful at the gate, in prayer, in discernment, in correction, in love, in the small things. And often the small things are where the whole direction of the household begins to turn. A soft answer, a prayer whispered before responding, a boundary calmly spoken, a worldly influence removed, a hard conversation handled with humility, a habit brought back into order, a spirit of offense refused, a child corrected early, a daughter taught modesty, a son taught honor, a husband strengthened by peace rather than strife, a table set with gratitude, a home cleansed not only on the outside, but in the spirit. These are holy acts. These are not small things in the eyes of heaven. After the fast, I believe the Father is calling us not only to feel spiritually renewed, but to become more watchful, to ask, what did this fast reveal? What did the Father put his finger on? What did I notice once the noise was quiet? What attitude rose up in me? What grief surfaced? What burden became clear? What needs to be corrected? What needs to be released? What needs to be guarded? What needs to be brought back into alignment? because fasting isn't only about what leaves the body, it's about what's exposed in the heart. And once something is exposed, wisdom asks what to do with it. We do not fast and then ignore what the Father showed us. We do not consecrate and then return to carelessness. We do not ask for discernment and then refuse to act when He gives it. A woman of wisdom receives the lesson and carries it forward. She does not leave consecration at the end of the fast. She brings it home. She brings it to the table, to her speech, to her motherhood, to her marriage, to her ministry, to her household. She becomes watchful over what is rising. And I want to say this gently. Sometimes what we need to watch first is not someone else. Sometimes it is ourselves. What is rising in me? Is impatience rising? Is resentment rising? Is fear rising? Is control rising? Is weariness rising? Is unbelief rising? Is accusation rising? A wise woman does not only discern the household around her, she also allows the Father to search the household within her. Because we can only guard rightly when our own hearts are being guarded by Him. If we try to correct others while our own spirit is full of agitation, we may wound instead of restore. If we try to guard the home from a place of fear, we may control instead of shepherd. If we try to confront from a place of bitterness, we may release the very thing we're trying to remove. So after the fast, we ask the Father, cleanse me first, order me first, quiet me first, teach me to watch without fear, teach me to correct without pride, teach me to discern without suspicion, teach me to guard without harshness, teach me to love without compromise. That is the heart of a wise woman. She's not passive, but she is also not reckless. She is not silent out of fear, but she is not loud out of the flesh. She is sober, prayerful, awake. She watches over the ways of her household. So my encouragement today is this: watch what is rising. Watch what is rising in your own heart. Watch what is rising in your home. Watch what is rising in your conversations. Watch what is rising in the habits, the influences, the attitudes, the hidden places. And when you see something that does not belong, do not panic. Pray. Ask for wisdom. Ask for timing. Ask for humility. Ask for courage. Ask Abba how to address it in a way that restores order and protects peace. A fast may last 24 hours, but the fruit of a fast should continue. May the lessons of consecration follow us into our homes. May our households not be shaped by careless leaven. May our homes be places where peace rises, where honor rises, where humility rises, where gratitude rises, where holiness rises, where the fear of Adonai rises like a pleasing fragrance before Him. May we be women who watch early, women who pray early, women who discern early, women who correct gently when needed, women who guard what is holy, women who do not eat the bread of idleness, women who understand that the household is sacred ground. She watches over the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. May Abba Yah make us faithful watchwomen over what He has entrusted to us. Shalom, precious sisters.